You can follow me on Instagram at Sergio Guitarist to stay in touch with my various activities, which include new podcast episodes, teaching courses, and my various guitar projects. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hi, and welcome to Guitar Conversations. I'm your host, Sergio Ercole. Join me as I interview local and international guitarists and talk with them about their story, inspirations, and their creative processes. Guitarist John Williams needs no introduction. He's a household name amongst guitarists and classical music lovers around the world. He's performed internationally for over 60 years, having recorded some 200 albums, and thrilled and amazed audiences around the world with his dazzling technique and incredible breadth of repertoire. His contribution to classical guitar cannot be overstated, having inspired many generations of young people to learn the instrument. I was thrilled to chat with John recently about his thoughts on guitar playing, teaching, the music industry, practice, guitars, and much more. I hope you enjoy my conversation with John Williams. John Williams, welcome to Guitar Conversations.
Pleasure.
I don't know if you've had a chance to sort of peruse what this podcast is about.
I'm happy and enjoy talking about anything, so whatever it is.
Great. Well, it's an opportunity for me to talk to mostly Australian guitarists, but I've also been talking to guitarists in other countries and Australia's overseas, especially, about story and projects. And I go into a bit of a biography with my interviewee, but I think with you, it'd be really fantastic to talk a little bit about your connection with Australia and your time spent here. I'm in Melbourne. I'm actually in the Mornington Peninsula as we speak.
Whereabouts?
In Macrae, down the bottom of Arthur's Seat, basically, on the beach.
Oh, I know, because I have a cousin down in Balnarring, and I used to go there often. In fact, we used to share a place down there. He sort of runs and lives in the place now. Yeah, Merrick's North. Back in the 80s and early 90s, I used to go out often, and stay for a long time. So there's a documentary on me. It's a part of the Seville concert DVD, and it shows me there. In fact, at that time, it kept on saying I sort of lived there half the time, which I didn't really. But so I know it well. Yeah.
I met you in the late 90s. This is going back a few years when I was at Melbourne Uni, and John Griffiths invited you to come to Melbourne Uni for
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
So I played some Bach for you, and it was.
Oh my God! Right.
But it was a fantastic experience. You were born in Melbourne.
Yep.
And I was just interested in hearing about some of your memories.
I can tell you, my father is a Londoner, you see, and he went out and met my mother just before the Second World War. So I was born in 1941, and most of the time of those 10, 11 years before we came to London, most of that time we lived in St Kilda, and then I used to the last few years of that time, we had befriended the family, the Jorgensen family up at Montsalvat, and Sebastian Jorgensen, who's still out there at Christmas Hills, but Sebastian, Seb and myself basically learned guitar from my father together. So those are the main points of those years in my early years there. And of course, subsequently, I've been out to Australia and Melbourne often. I always say, because I sometimes get asked, do I feel Australian or English? And I usually say, well, I feel more Australian than English, but more Londoner than either.
I don't know if you're aware, but last year at the Adelaide Guitar Festival, there was a little talk / demonstration about you. It was called John Williams on Toast.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Rafi and Janet were talking about that. That's right.
Yeah. And Susan Ellis had a little presentation, she had some photos, and I'm just looking now at what looks like it says Sadie Bishop with your dad, and it said Elsternwick, Melbourne, but I'm not sure if that's correct. May have been St Kilda.
Yes, that's Elston. Well, that is up St Kilda. That's just off the Brighton Road, yeah.
So, and it's Sadie there, and your father in a classical position, and looking like very, very correct in terms of classic. He doesn't have a footstool. That's the only thing I can see from the photo.
Oh, right. No, it's interesting because those, my father that's another whole story, of course. It was quite an interesting character. Whenever he was kind of doing some formal thing like a photo or having to talk on television, I think the roots of it were that he was actually quite nervous in those circumstances, and therefore he looked quite formal and a little bit stiff. But, of course, when he was not in those situations, when he was just with a small group of people or with his usual crowd, family and other people visiting, he was absolute opposite. He was absolutely not like that at all. So it's quite an interesting contrast. So if he looked a bit formal and stiff, that would be the reason. But normally, it was only because someone would be taking a photograph of him. So he'd get a bit self-conscious.
Right.
Yeah.
On your mother's side, she has some Chinese heritage?
Yeah, my mother was half Chinese. Her father was a first generation. He was born, I'm not sure exactly, I think 1860s, to Chinese parents. He was Chinese. So my grandfather, who I never met, he died a couple of years before I was born. He was Chinese, and he was a very, very, very renowned barrister and a KC. That's in those days King's Counsel, which for a Chinese was amazing and exceptional. And he was also a Mason, which is another exceptional thing, given the history of these movements. And he's celebrated now. They've just named a street after him in Canberra. And there was already a street in Wangaratta where his family, going back to the late 19th century, were based. So yes, that's the upbringing. But of course, they were. That generation, first part of the 20th century, especially the Chinese, were very, very good at assimilating. So my mother didn't speak Chinese. There was no Chinese culture directly in the family at all, because the whole idea was to become totally, I say anglicized, because Melbourne society was very sort of a little bit formally British Protestant in its establishment, So he was very integrated into that society. I mean, he used to play golf with Menzies, the Prime Minister, and he was into that social set. But so when my mother moved, my mother was she had two brothers and a sister, and she in particular was very into she was a little bit the more arty side of the family in today's things, and she loved jazz and left-wing thought and politics and things, and that's how she met my father when he moved out.
A similar thing happened to me, actually, because I was born in Italy, and when I came out when I was about 9, my parents knew quite a bit of English, and they said, "That's it, we're speaking English now," and I lost all my accent, which I sort of regret now in some ways.
I know. Well, that's a common thing. Is it? My best mate here in England, George Black. You probably know that name.
Yeah. And
George is Sam. He's a Greek family totally, but you'd never know it, from his voice or anything.
Because we're talking about Melbourne.
Yeah.
Occasionally you would come and do some things at the VC8, the Victorian College of the Arts.
Yep.
I was just curious because, in your book, the author mentions that there was at one point a loose plan for you to come and do sort of a kind of residency there.
There was a loose plan in my head.
Didn't it eventuate? It
did, for a variety of reasons, mostly family and personal on my side. And the particular thing at the time, John Hopkins was the principal of the college. Is a wonderful man, absolutely fantastic man. And I've had great admiration and really could regard him as a friend, I suppose, without being presumptuous. And I've since seen. I went to visit him a few years ago in South Melbourne, where he's still working as teaching a bit at the new School of Music. Anyway, so that was an idea in my mind at the time for various reasons, which I won't go into. Well, one of them I can mention was that I had a son. At that time, he was born in '82, and there was no question of me leaving England sort of for 3 months a year and leaving him. So that's the principal reason. Yeah.
But you also taught quite a bit in the UK in the early years at the Royal Northern College. Is that right?
Yes. Well, and actually, the history of that is I like Julian Bream. I went to the Royal College of Music to do a bit of general music. I wasn't as good as Julian at it. He's a really good pianist. Julian's a really good pianist, and at the time when he was a student in the sort of late 40s, he was also played the cello a bit. I was nothing like as good as him at all that. However, I did a bit of general music. When I left in 1960, 61, 62, Keith Faulkner, as the director of the college, asked me to come back and actually teach there, because they never had guitar teaching, and I hadn't done that. I'd done other musical subjects. So I did a bit of teaching at college, and for about 10 years. I didn't really enjoy it, and I think part of that is quite important in today's context, because although I was young, and although it was great sort of compliment to him, I was very honoured to be asked to do that. I don't really believe in the weekly hour lesson with a single student. I don't think it's the best way of learning at college level. I think learning as a youngster, as a child, anything up to the age of entry to college or uni, the single lesson is good, because you have to iron out a lot of technical problems, possibilities, developments. You have to do that early. The problem with the guitar now is that a lot of the kids, students, get to college and they have still really not developed the basis of really good technique. I mean, it's an amazing thing to say, and it's a terrible thing to say. It's the sort of thing you don't find on other instruments. But because the standard of teaching is so poor, and it still is, it's getting better, but it's still so bad that you find a lot of people come to the colleges, and there's so many problems to iron out. But they shouldn't have to do that at college. It should be on an advanced musical and technical level where people learn better in class. And so the older I get and the more experience I've seen, the more and more I'm convinced of that. So, for various reasons, I gave up that teaching. I think some of the students complained about me not, being away too often for playing, which is actually, to me, wasn't important. It was important how I made them up and what they got from it. Anyway, that's by the way. So I very soon after that, I decided I would go up to the Royal Northern College of Music, which had only recently opened. The Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester is an amalgamation of the old Manchester School of Music, Royal School of Music, and the Northern College of Music. They amalgamated the two names and the two institutions. And Gordon Krosky, who was the guitar teacher there, and is an old pupil of my dad's, incidentally, I used to go up there roughly once every term, that's every 3 months, and I'd spend the whole day with the whole class, and it could be, depending on the year, could be 5, could be 8, could be 10 students all together. That I really, really enjoy. That was sort of the highlight for me. I don't know about the students, but I felt I could get a lot of stuff over there. A lot of things that were helpful to them and good, I hope, for the guitar.
And what sort of things at that level?
Well, I mean, another thing I did at the same time, chamber music, ensemble music. I was really pushing ensemble music, which I still do, but at the beginning, people weren't really doing that. It's not. I mean, I never claim to have started or originated anything, but looking back, I was certainly pushing it more at that level than anyone was doing, and concentrating on and sort of telling the guitarist, look, you're not phrasing like other people do because the music is not organized and arranged properly. And so I instituted an attitude towards playing ensemble music, For example, one thing I had was the string quartets of early string quartets of Mozart and especially Haydn, perfectly playable on 4 guitars. The only thing is you have the C clef for the viola part. Well, there's usually, in the early quartets, quite a simple part, so it's easy to drop that out. You can do that in half an hour. And, of course, the cello goes down to the low C. Well, if you really need to, you can tune the guitar's lower string down to D and then C. But most of the notes normally available. So you just have the problem that the top 2 violin parts sometimes cross because of the octave. You can't play the top part, even the second violin part, always at pitch. You're playing octave. But that doesn't matter. The parts can cross. You're not doing something, to perform at the Royal Festival Hall. You're doing something as an exercise. And parts can cross anyway. And so it doesn't matter. And I'd done this at Paco Peña's summer school in Spain in the early 80s. And it was so successful. I did a little bit at the Royal Northern as well. So that's what I was concentrating on, but also on interpretation and transcription a little bit. And of course, I just used to hear what they were doing with their duets and solos. I mean, I'm not excluding solo playing. I was listening and giving any tips I felt, But the ensemble thing was very important. And if I could just follow on with this, one of the I suppose the two at my time teaching at the Royal Northern, 2 of the outstanding students at that time were a chap called Forbes Henderson, whose name you may have heard of here, plays around here in England a lot, and in particular Richard Wright. And you've probably seen some of his arrangements and early arrangements for people just starting, and includes a lot of ensemble thing. And he was instrumental in a lot of advice in changing some of the main music curriculums here in England. The Associated Board exams, the EGTA, the European Guitar Teachers Association, all that activity, which is a lot to do with ensemble playing, and Richard developed that a lot. And he's now the guitar teacher at the Hudi Menuhin School in England, and has outstanding students. And of course, he's in a atmosphere there of very specialized string teaching, violin, cello, viola, etc. So the guitar, there is a link through all that with this ensemble. Going back to Melbourne times, and I'm sort of telling a lot of this in detail because I still think it's the most important thing it's the most important thing in guitar playing still is the integration of guitar with other instruments and reflecting, not just the technical side, but the musical and the cultural side as well. So it's very interesting. My father had started all that right back in Melbourne, because his background, he was a dance band, these days we'd say a sort of session stroke jazz guitarist. He'd always loved the classical guitar, and that's why he was teaching Seb Jorgensen and myself, because the classical guitar was really ultimately his great love. And I don't know if you've seen any of these photographs, but there are quite a lot of them. He was organizing guitar trios and quartets in Melbourne at our house, 82 Brighton Road. And, and he was even experimenting with getting a sort of higher guitar. I don't think that they work so well, but, he had, we used to do arrangements of Haydn and Grieg and Sibelius and various things like that. I've still got the little folder of all his early arrangements.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, and when we came to London, he continued, even in the early days, with all the battles he had, to try and earn a living, because life was very tough when we came back here in 1952. He was he was straight away organising and writing. I've still got the folder of all these arrangements with guitar, viola, and violin. He was arranging things by Telemann, Legrenzi, Rameau, etc. All the, a lot of those early composers, the Baroque composers, and it's quite an extraordinary thing. And so he was really a very, very big instigator of all that. And the sort of thread has gone along through his students, and it's a great legacy he left.
It's very interesting to hear that, and perhaps one day it would be fantastic to see some of those arrangements for school.
Well, a couple of them, funnily enough, are arranged, but published by Schott and Company, a couple of arrangements of Vivaldi. It's just for two guitars those were, but he did lots of other stuff with violin and cello and things.
And do you think, and this seems relatively clear to me, but the fact that there's this attraction towards this beautiful and amazing repertoire, which sort of seduces young players, and it kind of is what attracts them to the guitar often. But then there's that sort of, starting at that deep end aspect of it, which the brain just can't handle all of those things at once. So do you think that the chamber thing really helps to develop, like you're saying, the musicality? But on
no question. You see, because kids, if you everyone will know this, that kids, apart from singing things, in whatever culture they are, but kids certainly in Western music start in recorder ensembles. They start playing recorder, which is a relatively easy instrument to start on. And they play in little recorder ensembles. You've got the soprano, the alto, the recorder, and they play in little ensembles. And they're playing one note at a time. The problem traditionally with the guitar repertoire, especially the learning repertoire, is that it's been centered around solo playing, which is mistake number one. And mistake number two is that the pieces, understandably, the lovely pieces which kids of any age sort of love and want to play, are basically too difficult to play well, meaning too difficult to play well musically. It even operates, this is one of the compromises of the guitar. You have the magic of the sound and the fact that we love the instrument, we love the music. But if I give you an example, do you know that Pretorius dances?
Yeah, the terpsichore.
Okay, there's a perfect example. Even taking a slow piece, and this I used to do in the classes, like, say, there's a lovely ballet, which, it's basically in the arrangement by Pretorius, it's 4 parts. Could be 3, 4, 5 parts, but it's basically in 4, certainly 3 parts, but 4 occasionally, okay? We play the whole lot in chords on the guitar. We play the tune, and it's supported by the chord and the harmony. But if you play that on the ensemble for which Pretorius arranged it, which could be 4 recorders or wind instruments, it could be 4 viols, each player, each instrument is on a single line. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, and therefore each line is beautifully phrased. It's very simple, but simply and beautifully phrased. When we play the whole lot, play the chords, the whole lot, it's not.
No, that's right. It's so much more difficult.
If you separate those parts, how they're being played within the solo version, you'll hear that they're not being, the sounds don't match, the lines are not continuous. You're using mixtures of open strings and stop strings, and some of the notes are short because you have to move your finger to the chord on the next beat. It's from a musical point of view, it's a mess.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
But from a guitar point of view, it sounds very nice.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not proposing any simple, perfect answer to this, but they are the two extremes. And I'll tell you another one, and I've just remembered one that I used to use a lot and still do. The first of the 20 saw studies, the Segovia version of the 20 saw studies, yep. C major, yeah?
Yep.
I'm sure every guitarist will know this, and they will finger it in the usual position, and there we go, the first position with the open E.
Yeah.
So you've got 3 open E's as the chord changes, and then you've got a D on the second string.
Yeah.
Okay? If you were a violinist, you wouldn't dream of playing an open E with your bow 3 times and then a stopped D.
Yeah.
You would play the E on the second string. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. For continuity.
So, I mean, I'm taking that because I'm sure most of the people who play what we're discussing, they will identify with that straight away. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should go and refinger everything so that we can actually, get over those problems, because you can't always get over them. But they are a basic characteristic of, let's call them sort of compromises we make by playing solo on the guitar. So one of the important things that was done here in the associated board exams was to change all the grades, all from 1 to 8, to take account of this problem and to make it easier and more musical for beginners, grades 1, 2, 3, to play something that starts to be more in keeping with what's expected of other instruments. And one of the things suggested and enabled is that the students, the child can come along and the teacher or someone else can play an accompanying part so that they can play just a single line. In the old days, these exam syllabuses would have the sort of kid trying to play Villa-Lobos Prelude, number 1 in E minor on grade 3 or grade 4. And it's ridiculous,
Yeah. If I can sort of steer the direction into your learning, how did your dad navigate that with you? You must have heard him playing some exceptional things, and did you just say no? You have to start with your veggies and potatoes.
Well, he was just really brilliant with basic hand positions. I mean, he was of that generation of disciples of Segovia, and therefore it was just to get the right hand positions, and he was very good on the finer points of the psychology of how you're playing. I mean, if you've got a finger waving around unnecessarily, saying, what's that finger doing? Minimal movement, conserving your, things that operate. I mean, if you watch great sportsmen, it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You watch Roger Federer playing, he doesn't stamp his feet around and flail his arms. It's all a lovely little continuous movement, So my father was very... very good on that, that was his thing,
and obviously that awareness, because this is what I find with my students, is he managed to plant that awareness in you at quite a young age, so that you were then able to sort of do that yourself, because you become self-reliant about that.
Well, ultimately, sooner or later, I mean, obviously it doesn't operate at a child's level, but sooner or later, teaching is about how to help the more mature student and even professionals, how to teach themselves. And that's what we're doing. We're all learning all the time. I mean, I'm 74 and I'm learning stuff from people I play with, on other instruments and things. All the time. There's endless things to learn, and I think teaching is sort of teaching people how to teach themselves. I had a great compliment from the classes I referred to that I used to do in Spain at Paco Peña Summer School. I had one. In fact, I had a particularly good year where I was giving them Haydn quartets, and there was an Italian student there. Pretty advanced student, really sort of, he was professional already, but also coming to the summer school. And he was always playing the top line because he was really good at it. And I had a card from him after the next year. He wasn't there the next year or sometime following. And he said, I'm really, sorry I won't be there for next year for various reasons. However, he said, I've learned so much last year. I mean, I've learned all that I feel I can take in and all I need to. So, and I thought that's the best compliment you can have. You don't want someone that at that level. I have to emphasize, I'm not talking about kids and people that need a weekly lesson where it's a kind of practice session almost. It's like a practice session which
coaching.
Yeah, it's like a coaching. Yes, exactly. That's what the weekly session for young players is like. But when you get to this advanced level, you need to sort of just be able to convey things that help the student help themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's it. That's for me is the essence of it.
Yeah.
It's. I don't want a student to come along to me to say with a piece of music, and I take them through it and tell them do a retard here, rubato there, put this finger on the second string, do all that, and have to do that through every piece every week you go through. I'd much rather say, look, you're playing it like this. That's great. I think it's more successful like this for these reasons. Go away and think about it.
Yeah. It's funny, actually. That's
you know what I mean?
That's exactly what you said to me when I played.
Well, is it?
It really stuck with me.
But it's a funny thing. A lot of this is another thing to combat. A lot of students don't like that. We also live in an age, we've got to remember, where a lot of people like dictators. That's why you have a lot of dictatorships in the world. A lot of people like dictators, and they want Mr. Teacher to come along and tell them what to do. And it is not about that.
No, I totally. And to be honest, it was something that stuck with me for a long time. And I use in my own teaching this idea of, you're the actor.
Yeah.
What are you doing with your part? What story you're telling.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can support this podcast by heading over to latinguitarmastery.com and receive 20% off any course or subscription by entering the coupon code CONVERSATIONS. Now back to the interview.
I had a thing once, a very interesting thing in Spain again. As a player there, I think I can't remember now. There was a player who was very good at playing Bach and Schubert, but there was a French student, there was a Spanish student, and the Spanish students tended to be. I mean, this is the 1980s. It was still not a long time after their culture had been really dominated by the Franco dictatorship. And so their attitude to learning was very, very academic and very not very imaginative. And anyway, this other student, it was a French or a German student, can't remember, they played something absolutely beautifully. I think it was Bach. It was actually fantastic. And a couple of the Spanish students came up to me afterwards and they said, Mr. Williams, don't understand, because that was so completely different from the way you play it. Why didn't you tell him how to do it? And I thought, I felt like banging my head against a brick wall. This is obviously people who just didn't understand at all, so I had to try and explain to him. I said, look, he played it so great, it was really convincing the way he did it. And I sort of gave up,
Yeah. Do you think, I don't really want to go too much in the Segovia direction, but that was a little bit how he taught, I think.
Oh, not a little bit, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. The thing is that he was such a giant figure. See, for me, as a young person, for a lot of us of that generation, we're so in awe of this, amazing, and it's beautiful playing, beautiful sound. You do get caught up in that, and that's what you have to accept, But and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is you have to see it at the time, and at the time it was fine, but you have to go on from that. And the trouble has been ever since. And, it's decreasing, but it's still the case. It's like the Segovia Adoration Society. It's like a religion. And you've got people who still teach and copy all those little, not the things that do Segovia any favors at all, to point out the very, very, very idiosyncratic and basically unmusical little habits he had, which were part of his charm, but they're not things to be repeated.
There's a couple of things that I've always wanted to ask you in relation to music and the way that it seems to work for you. And they're just quick fire questions. You can say yes or no, basically. But
okay.
One of them was about memorizing. pretty much every time I've seen you play, it's always been almost always from memory.
Yeah.
And it just seems like you're very comfortable with that. Is that just an innate thing you've had, or is it something you had to work on?
No, it's always. I don't think I am a great memorizer, actually. I tend to. I have to really apply myself when I have to do it. If it's. But yes, no. I mean, all things being equal, it's much nicer for the audience and for your own involvement to play from memory. There's no question about that. However, there's a lot of music where the dynamics are very important, and where, I mean, it's just a practical point. Some people find it difficult, and if memory is inhibiting the way you're playing because you're a little bit frightened of forgetting, that's the worst. So it's much better to have the music there, but not like a lot of people have the music. The music stands in front of the guitar. You can't see the person. You can't see. If you're using music, it's got to be on a very low stand. And since you're looking down at the fingerboard and your own fingers anyway, it's got to be sort of, not as if you're sitting there looking straight ahead, glassy-eyed, reading each. You know what I mean? It's there as a prompt. But and especially with modern music, things like there's a great piece by Petrassi, kind of called Nunc. It's about 8-9 pages, and it's full of dynamics, and it's very loosely called avant-garde piece of the 60s, 70s. I always use music for that because I wanted to be in control of the dynamics and not to. The trouble is that familiarity. The more you get to know it, you can actually start to see sort of traditional patterns in it, which are not to do with the dynamics that the composer's written. So I need to have a constant reminder of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you use like a particular method of doing it, or is it just you're playing it, or you're reading it, thinking about it? Most
of the time, it's just because I really like a piece and I play it so often, I gradually remember it.
Yeah, just like that.
But every so often, there's a piece where I need, and I want to, and I need to do it by heart. And if it's a bit of a time problem, meaning I need to learn it by, say, 2 months' time or whatever it is, I'll go each sort of page or line at a time and just do my best to remember it, mostly it's things I like, I do, and I remember it sort of easily. It's a bit of both.
When you're playing, is there something you're paying particular attention to? Or are you trying to just be in the moment?
There's always periphery things, like there's a particular bit you've got to really concentrate technically because you don't want to mess. But mostly, and ideally, and most of the time, you're really doing with the music what you want to do.
Do you have a stretching routine?
No, I'll tell you what I have. It's I often, because, I'm sort of retired now.
Yeah.
I'm sort of semi-retired. Or as a musician friend in London said, semi-required. No, I am but I do play in London. I'm not doing any travelling or any concerts outside London. That's my retirement, but I'm doing odd things in London. Okay, and the reason I mention that is that because when I am going to play, because I'm not regularly doing concerts, your fingers get out of practice, which is a problem actually of being semi-retired, because I like playing, and I do play. There's hardly a day goes by without playing, but you have to do certain scales and sort of legato exercises to keep your fingers strong enough, So I try and do that every day, but I must say I haven't done it now. I had a very great month, 3 weekends at the Globe Theatre in London. There's a new indoor theatre at the Globe. The Globe is the Shakespeare's Globe, the outdoor theatre. And there's a new indoor theatre called the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse. And they started music there last year. And I did 2 weekends, meaning four gigs. And this June, there's just been 3 weekends, which I did, where I curate, meaning I organise and get the people I want
Brilliant.
there and play myself. So, for something like that, I have to start practicing, a few weeks before to make sure my fingers are strong enough.
Get things moving again.
Yeah, gentle stretching, but not too much. You can do damage like that. If you're interested, you should look up the Globe, Shakespeare's Globe. Look up concerts at the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse, and it'll show you the programs we had in June.
Fantastic. Well, I'd love to come. Hop on a plane at some point. Yeah, it'd be fantastic.
Well, we just got Philip Houghton over for it.
Oh, right. Oh, that would have been amazing.
Yeah, we got him over for the whole 3 weeks because we did his piece Light on the Edge.
I was just talking to a few friends. Someone mentioned, can you ask John Williams about practicing quietly? Do you have a way of practicing quietly?
I never sort of thought of that. Yes, I mean, not specifically. I never thought of it. Certainly practicing slowly. I think, the things about control, playing notes, if you're talking about single notes with either appiando or with tirando, with sort of ordinary non-appiando, fucking control, it's good to sort of just play little bits very softly. I don't know about playing whole pieces softly. I don't see any benefit in that.
That wouldn't work, yeah.
No. I mean, it certainly is an exercise in control to do odd notes, little bits of scales and things, and arpeggios. Exactly. A little bit the same as playing fast and slow. Most practice habits tend to be centered around sort of mechanical, just repeating things, hoping that the fingers will get better at doing it. And I always think that's a terrible mistake. You just need to practice very slowly to distill what the movement of your fingers is, and then maybe as fast as you can to try and just coordinate the two things, the two extremes, but just to sort of mechanically go on. It's a little bit like like anything mechanical, like a car engine. It doesn't do the engine any good to go at a constant sort of 28 miles an hour all the time. It needs to be revved, at very high rev sometimes, and you need.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're still playing a Greek Smallman guitar?
I'm still playing. I certainly am. I've got my two main guitars now from the year 2000. Yep.
Okay, so you've had them for a while.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I first started playing in sort of 80, 81, 82. Yep.
Do you have other guitars? Do you still play traditional guitars?
No, none at all.
Yep. So just, do you ever come across other guitars which you sort of think, yes, this I would quite like this guitar?
No, I tell you what, I've been into so thoroughly and from a long time ago, but I'm not. I am interested, and every now and then I hear guitars, hear people playing guitars, which are very beautiful sound. I know that some people think I'm a bit blind or that to beauty of different kinds of sound from other guitars because I'm so wedded to the Smallman.
Yeah.
The Smallman thing, let's call it.
Yeah.
But it's not simply because I like playing them. I've also given it a lot of thought. And I've, one way or another, through recording and all my experience with playing, I've developed sort of firm ideas as to sound, and I understand a lot about sound. And there is a sort of problem involved with guitar sound, and there's no solution to it other than you play the guitar you like playing. The Smallman, let's call it the Smallman sound. If I could sum up in terms of music, not just the guitar, the Smallman sound to me is more musical. Now, I'm not saying that better as a quality of sound, because everyone likes different kind of cheese, different kind of wine, different kind of guitar sound. So there's no better or worse for something that you just like, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to dynamic range, I mean, in music we want a wide range of color and a wide range of volume and attack. And we also, thirdly, want a very full feedback to yourself while you're playing, to your fingers, and a response. Okay, so there's three things there. And, the Smallman guitar does a lot for me. The range of dynamics, if I'm playing a very contemporary piece, something with a lot of dynamics, like, say, Leo Brouwer, or if you're playing Barrios, where you want a lot of warmth and really sort of absolute sort of, what's the word, thick, furry warmth from the sound, that's what I want to get. Or if I'm playing Scarlatti and I want to get some really percussive attack. And if I want to play chords that, like simultaneous, not arpeggiated, simultaneous sort of 4-note chords, thumb and 3 fingers, the sort of thing you might get on piano in the mid-range by doing the same thing. Musically, it's very important to be able to do that. And let's call it the traditional guitar sound, the fan bracing and the rather springy top, doesn't really do it properly. But and the but is important. But for a lot of people, none of that is as important as that. Let's call it the typically silvery Spanish sound, which is a different sound from the Smallman sound. But you can't, for me, I pick up one, I can play it. I'm talking about the traditional guitar, fan-based guitar. I can play it and I can say, well, that's a lovely sound, that's beautiful. And then I try and push it to do something musically dramatic or even something incredibly quiet on the top string. Just a very, very beautiful but sustained melody. It doesn't quite do it. So anyway, that's I could go on forever.
I'm getting a picture of what you're saying, and it sounds to me like it really just delivers on all those criteria.
Yeah. And I have to say, an interesting thing is that for people that use the Smallman around the world, Ben Verdery in New York, other players here, Craig, blah blah blah, all that. Andrei Lebedev, I think, is using one as well. When they play, and I've obviously found it over and over again, when you play with other instruments or play with orchestra or with an ensemble of other instruments, those players immediately hear what you're doing and they say, oh, what sort of guitar do you play?
Yeah.
Because it responds more like their instruments do than what they've heard before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They breathe a sigh of relief.
They do, actually.
I recently purchased a guitar by Richard Howell. I don't know if you remember Richard.
Oh, yes. He's down the peninsula, isn't he?
Yeah, he's around the corner from me. So.
He used to be, yeah.
Yeah.
Good guitars, actually.
Yeah, and I've sort of fallen in love with them. So that's what I'm playing at the moment. But I also have a Paul Sheridan guitar, which is similar to the Smallman tradition. I
know, because I remember he's from Perth, and he came up to Darwin when Greg was doing some classes there on his thing, and yeah.
There you go. So I've sort of got the best of both worlds in a sense, because
great.
Now collaborations. I know we're sort of running out of time, so just to finish up.
Okay for me. It's up to you. Yeah.
It's okay for you. Okay, good. I just want to. I mean, you've done so many collaborations. I was actually sort of thinking about a lot of the people that I interview, and they're top guitarists, but a lot of them actually start with popular guitar, and they might start with strumming and Beatles tunes or whatever, and then they cross over. It didn't seem like that happened with you.
No, it didn't.
However, you made up for that by sort of crossing over a lot in your career and playing with lots of popular artists. So I thought that was an interesting thing that you've incorporated that into what you do.
Well, it just happened because, in London, once you're out in the musical world and doing things, it just happens.
Yeah.
It really does. And it's just a question of whether you're open to it there's no sudden decision at any time whether to be open to it. It just happens. And it's a question of whether you welcome the opportunities and develop them if it appeals to you, That's all.
Have there been any standouts for you? Is it?
Well, it's very difficult to say because it's like every opportunity that's come. I mean, I can remember going back now to 1960, 61. There were big variety shows on television here that you wouldn't know them, but some of the names you might know. But there used to be a thing here called the Billy Cotton Band Show.
Yeah, right.
He was like an old music hall style music orchestra, conductor, and he had a television show, very, very popular. And I was a guest on that. I was asked to be a guest, actually, by Eric Sykes, the comedian.
Oh, yeah, the comedian, yep.
And he was on it, and he had a little act with a guitar, and he said, should we do it together? And so, the classical establishment would have been were in horrors at that time. As a classical musician, you don't appear on shows like that. And the same was for Val Doonican. Do you know that name?
Yes, we had that in Australia, I think.
Because he's come out to Australia, and it's Saturday night. 18 million people live, and he loves the guitar, and he was nice enough to invite me on it, and I did his show about 5 or 6 times. I could go on with example. I don't want to obsess about any particular one. So I'm just someone that says, "Oh, great, thank you, you loved it," and I do a little song with him. And then play my solo, or play Bach Gavotte or Recuerdos de Alhambra. You've got to play a lot of concerts to play that to 18 million people.
Yeah.
And I could say, like the Deer Hunter tune Cavatina obviously did a huge amount for the guitar. I mean, amazing.
Yeah.
And then just from my personal point of view, I met John Danquith and Cleo Lane.
Yeah. Yep.
Jazz singer and her husband, a composer, and I met them at I think it was an Africa Freedom Day at the Royal Albert Hall in London in the late 60s.
Yep.
And then so I got to know them, and we ended up, I used to play up at their festival, and we made two records together, and he did lots of arrangements for me. I mean, I could go on and on with all these different things. So. Or Ronnie Scott himself. There's a famous jazz club in London called Ronnie Scott's, and it's the one and only big famous jazz club, from the 1950s onwards. And he loved the guitar. You know what his favourite piece was? It was a little Scherzino Mexicano.
There you go.
He loved that piece. And every time I went to the club, he used to ask me to play it. And but he asked me to play at the club, and I said, but Ronnie, I don't play jazz. My father was a jazz. He said, no, come and play your Bach and Albéniz, play your thing, and we'll tell everyone not to serve food while you play. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's a question of how you respond to these things. It's not like my father used to say. You don't wake up at 3:30 in the morning in the middle of the night and say, oh, I know, I'm going to do X or Y, or Z. It doesn't work like that.
Well, it seems to me like it for you, it really, and for many of us now, it just pays to be open to opportunities, because then one thing will lead to the next, and new opportunities will open up.
But that's not the reason for doing it. The reason for doing it is because it's enjoyable. It's music. It's music.
Had the changes in the music industry and the recording industry had an impact on your career?
Yep. Yes, definitely. Huge. The last 10 years have seen a descending spiral.
Yeah. How have you navigated that?
Well, it's a huge change. I was going to say problem, but we've got to try and look on it, with positive signs, I think, which is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And the answer is very long and drawn out, and I don't want to bore you with it, but But basically, the big, let's say, in short, the big record companies have shot themselves in the foot because they've exploited populism for the worst reasons. In other words, for purely commercial reasons, not for good reasons. You can exploit populism for good reasons, for musical reasons, for communication, for between people, between cultures. But the big record companies have done it as parts of conglomerates, publishing firms. I won't mention any names because that might be libelous.
I'll beep it out.
But that's what they've done, and so they've seen by their figures decreasing sales. Therefore, they've put specialised investment into certain things. Every now and then, there's a big opera that they'll invest money in. But basically, they're treating music like celebrity TV. The newest, youngest flavour of the month gets really promoted for 6 months, and then they get dropped for the next one. So with all that, the growth of downloading and digital stuff and all the copyrights involved, it's absolute minefield. I've been lucky because, I've stuck with the one record company, CBS, from 1964, and taken over by Sony. And the last few years of Sony, in my case, before I sort of left them about, 8 years ago? No, I can't remember exactly. The boss of Sony Classical Music, it was a fantastically intelligent and really interesting man. He's now the general manager of the Met, the Metropolitan Opera in New York, Peter Gelb. Very famous name in the industry for various reasons. And I got along great with him. And some of the last projects I did for Sony, the Magic Box, Diablo Suelto, that's the Venezuelan one. Magic Box is the African one. Leo Brower, the
Cameron, no.
That's it. It's Cameron Negro. That's what the CD was called, wasn't it? After the piece. That's right. Were done under his sort of overseeing. I've always had, I was so lucky for all that time because I could record anything that I liked, any program they say yes, and then I did. And also during that time we did the film album, sort of thing. Anyway, so that was great. But very soon after that, I could see that things were not being. Even Diablo Suelto itself was not sold and marketed sort of fully. They help towards the beginning and then it sort of peters out. And one of the worst things had already happened before Peter Gelb's time was in Australia. Because Tim Kaine and I did a CD. I think it was a brilliant CD. I'm really proud of that. And really fantastic playing and everything. And the interesting choice, variety of repertoire. It was deleted within 6 months in Australia. And that for me is a real, quote unquote criminal thing to do musically and from a business point of view, because Tim and I are both well known in Australia. If they'd promoted that properly, it could have done very well, not just in Australia, but elsewhere. And, people were going to record shops and being told, no, it's been deleted, but you can order it on special order. Well, of course you can order it on special order. You can go to a marketplace and look for a second-hand copy if you want to. Do you know what I mean? It's a meaningless thing to do. So that was the beginning of the rot for me, and I thought, this is it's not going well. And then Sony was taken over by Bertelsmann in Germany, and then they've joined. The total thing is a mess. I then had correspondence with some very nice people about when I started producing my own CDs. To see if there's any possibility or anything interesting to get a deal, like whereby they distribute it, even though I would do it. And they were so ignorant of how the process worked. I thought, forget it. So that's when I started doing my own things. Of course, which was great. When I started with mainly because I had some of my own little pieces. They're not great compositions, but I just wanted to keep them, and I didn't want them deleted on another label. I didn't, I thought if I do them myself, I've always got them. I didn't want them deleted and yet unable to use them again, and all that sort of thing that happens. So that's why I started my own label, JCW, 1, 2, 3, and then there's the From a Bird, Stepping Stones, and the latest one, which I'm really proud of because I've got a huge amount of money and effort into it, is the Concerto album.
Concerto. So I bought one.
Oh, you bought one? Good.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, that was things because I'd always wanted to do Ross Edwards' piece, but again, it's finding a context. Sometimes I don't know about how Ross felt, but I know that Leo Brower felt, and Ross must have felt for some time. Why didn't you record this? Why did you do it? When you're with a record company, it's not a question of whether they would let you record it. I could have recorded anything I liked at any time, but you've got to have some confidence they're going to sell it properly. So anyway, I was thrilled to be able to do Ross's piece because it's terrific.
Beautiful, and there's some beautiful arrangements of things that I've heard before with the orchestra. And
that's a Salinas thing, the Inti Illimani.
Yeah, that's beautiful too. So you have a record company of your own, or kind of a.
Well, it's not a company; it's just me.
So when you record your music, do you have a distribution channel? Do you?
Yes, it's all through Naxos.
Naxos, right? Okay, so they can't help with the distribution.
Naxos, the distributor. They're not. Don't forget, they're only a distribution company, so they don't do any promotion. So I can't get the individual promotion in different countries that a record company would do.
Yeah. Yep.
But they distribute through their different areas.
Yep. So now you're, as you said, semi-required or semi-retired. Might we be hearing some more recordings perhaps in the future?
Oh, for sure. Yes. I don't know. At the moment, I've got sort of one at the half at the back of my mind. It won't be done. It'll be done in the next 6 months or so. Yep.
Are we likely to see you in Melbourne at any stage?
Well,
obviously not as a performer, but
just as a trip. You never know. But I don't have any plans. I don't have any plans to travel anywhere. I get these invitations, saying you don't have to play, just come and visit. But a part of it is the travelling and all that stuff, I'm doing a lot of writing now, and putting quite a lot into, in my small way, just pieces I like writing and doing, and they're going very well. And so I'm planning a record, and I play in London, and so it's quite enough to do.
Have you ever considered putting anything pedagogical out?
I have a website. Have you seen that? It's my little pieces for free download. That I'm very behind on, and I had said I was going to do Vivaldi and Granados, which I'm not sure that I will, but I'm definitely putting my own pieces slowly on it. And I actually played I've got a thing called Homage to Raphael, which is homage to Raphael Pugliese, the great harpsichordist, which I played at the Globe. It's the longest piece I've written. It's about 8 or 9 minutes, and that went down very well. I'm going to put that on soon. There's 2 or 3 pieces of mine that are not on yet that I'm going to do in the next couple of months.
Well, John, it's been a privilege to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, not at all. I hope everything's going well for you, and if you need to do anything again, just let us know on the email, yeah? Absolutely.
We'll stay in touch, and if I'm ever in London, maybe we can do a take 2.
That's it. Okay.
All right. Best of luck, John, and we'll speak soon.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay.
Bye then. Don't forget to visit guitarconversations.com for show notes, more articles, and also to join the mailing list. Now, the website where John posts his music is called www.johnwilliamsguitarnotes.com, all spelt out. And you can find out more about his concert series at the Santa Monica Playhouse at www.shakespearesglobe.com. I'm now going to leave you with some music from John's latest CD called Concerto. This track is called Adagio Sostenuto, also known as Homage to Elgar, by Stephen Goss. It's the second movement from his guitar concerto. My name is Sergio Ercole. Thanks for listening to my guitar conversation.